What's up, everyone? Welcome back to Breakdown Epic. Have you ever watched a reality TV couple survive years of family drama, explosive arguments, and endless criticism, only to wonder if the real disaster was happening completely off camera? Because this story isn't about another family fight or another emotional reunion. It's about the moment everything came crashing down. Imagine opening your front door and watching police officers lead your husband away in handcuffs while your children are only a few rooms away. Imagine realizing that the person you defended for years had been living a completely different life behind your back. And the most shocking part? According to this story, the arrest wasn't actually the beginning. It was the ending of a secret that had been growing for months. Today, we're breaking down this fictional story inspired by the world of reality TV, uncovering every twist, every betrayal, and every decision that pushed this marriage to the edge. Just to let you know, this video is based on a fictional story created for entertainment purposes. Now, let's get into it. Everything seemed to fall apart in a single night. Elizabeth stood frozen as officers escorted Andrei out of their home, and in that moment, the confident, fearless man everyone knew suddenly looked like someone carrying the weight of years of hidden mistakes. But here's the thing. Situations like this never happen overnight. There's almost always a chain of small decisions that slowly builds toward one massive explosion. And honestly, that's what makes this story so interesting. It isn't really about one arrest. It's about what happened before anyone realized something was wrong. A few months earlier, life still looked normal from the outside. Social media was full of smiling family photos, happy moments with the kids, and the same confident image fans had always seen.
If you only looked at Instagram, you'd probably think everything was perfect. But as we all know, social media deserves an Oscar sometimes. Behind closed doors, things were quietly changing. Bills were becoming harder to explain. Conversations were getting shorter. And Andrei seemed distracted almost all the time. At first, Elizabeth blamed stress. Maybe work wasn't going well. Maybe he was feeling pressure from providing for the family. Those explanations sounded reasonable until they stopped making sense. She began noticing strange bank transactions, money disappearing without explanation, and financial statements that simply didn't add up. Every time she asked about it, Andrei had another excuse. He promised everything was under control, insisted bigger opportunities were coming, and asked her to trust him just a little longer. In my opinion, that's usually the biggest warning sign in stories like this. It's not the mistake itself, it's when someone starts protecting the lie more than protecting the relationship. Little by little, trust started disappearing. Elizabeth wasn't looking for reasons to doubt her husband, but eventually the evidence became impossible to ignore. She discovered secret accounts, mysterious withdrawals, and spending patterns that pointed toward online gambling. Instead of asking for help, Andrei had convinced himself that one lucky win would solve every problem. Unfortunately, gambling rarely works that way. One loss leads to another, and suddenly you're risking tomorrow just to fix yesterday. That's exactly where this story says everything spiraled out of control. The more money disappeared, the more desperate Andrei became. Instead of admitting the truth, he buried himself even deeper. Passwords changed, bank statements disappeared, phone calls were taken in private. Even family dinners felt different because the tension had become impossible to hide. And believe me, families notice these things long before anyone says them out loud.
Elizabeth's relatives could feel something was wrong, but nobody knew just how serious the situation had become. Then came the moment that changed everything. Law enforcement arrived at the house with an arrest warrant, turning what looked like another difficult day into the biggest crisis their family had ever faced. Suddenly, every hidden account, every unpaid debt, and every secret decision became public. The headlines spread across social media within hours, and fans who had watched this couple for years couldn't believe what they were reading. Some people defended Andrei. Others immediately took Elizabeth's side. And of course, the internet did what the internet always does. Within minutes, everyone suddenly became a relationship expert. If social media handed out degrees, we'd apparently have millions of marriage counselors overnight. But jokes aside, this situation completely changed Elizabeth's perspective. She realized she hadn't been fighting alongside her husband anymore. She had been fighting alone without even knowing it. That emotional realization hit harder than any financial loss ever could. She wasn't just questioning the future of her marriage, she was questioning whether the life she'd been protecting had ever really existed the way she believed. And from that moment forward, every decision became about protecting herself and her children instead of protecting appearances. What happened next was something Elizabeth never imagined she'd have to do. Instead of defending her husband like she had so many times before, she found herself searching for answers on her own. She started going through old financial records, emails, and account statements, and with every document she opened, another piece of the puzzle fell into place. The picture that emerged was heartbreaking. This wasn't one bad decision. According to the story, it was months of hidden debt, risky gambling, and promises that were never true. The money wasn't simply disappearing. It had been feeding an addiction that Andrei believed he could eventually beat with one big win. Sadly, that's the dangerous trap gambling creates.
Every loss convinces you that the next bet will fix everything, when in reality it only digs the hole even deeper. Looking back, Elizabeth started replaying every strange moment in her head. The nights he stayed awake staring at his laptop, the excuses about business opportunities, the sudden mood swings whenever finances came up. At the time, each moment felt small, but when you connect them together, they tell a completely different story. That's something I actually liked about this fictional storyline because it reminds us that big betrayals are often built from dozens of tiny secrets rather than one dramatic event. Meanwhile, word of the arrest spread across social media faster than anyone could control. Fan pages exploded with theories, Reddit discussions filled with people analyzing old episodes, trying to figure out whether there had been warning signs all along. YouTube creators uploaded reaction videos within hours, while comment sections turned into battlefields. Some viewers argued that fame and constant public pressure had pushed Andrei toward making terrible decisions. Others believed personal responsibility mattered more than outside pressure. Honestly, everyone suddenly had an opinion. And if reality TV fans deserve one thing, it's an Olympic gold medal for creating theories before breakfast. But behind all that online noise was a real emotional struggle for Elizabeth. Every notification on her phone reminded her that millions of strangers were discussing the most painful chapter of her life. Instead of focusing on headlines, she shifted her attention to something much more important: her children. She quietly began separating finances, meeting with legal advisors, and making plans for a future she never expected to face alone. What really stood out to me is that this wasn't portrayed as a revenge story. It became a story about rebuilding.
Sometimes walking away isn't about giving up on someone else. It's about finally choosing yourself after spending years trying to save everyone around you. That emotional shift completely changed the direction of the story. Rather than asking whether Andrei could fix everything, the bigger question became whether trust could ever be rebuilt after so many hidden lies. And that's a much harder question to answer. Even Andrei seemed to realize the damage only after everything collapsed. Once the truth was out, all the promises that had sounded convincing before suddenly meant nothing. It's amazing how quickly words lose value when actions have been saying something completely different. As the legal process moved forward, Elizabeth finally understood something she'd been avoiding for years. She wasn't responsible for fixing every problem in the marriage. She couldn't keep carrying the weight of someone else's decisions. And sometimes the strongest thing a person can do isn't holding on, it's finally letting go. By the time she walked out of the courthouse, it wasn't victory she was feeling. It was exhaustion, mixed with relief. The marriage she had fought so hard to protect was over. But, for the first time in a long time, the future was finally back in her own hands. And, believe it or not, the final chapter of this story would prove that moving on can sometimes be even harder than walking away. In the final chapter of this story, the spotlight wasn't really on the courtroom anymore. It was on what happens after the headlines disappear. Because the truth is, cameras eventually leave. Social media moves on to the next scandal, and fans stop talking. But the people involved still have to wake up every morning and live with the consequences.
According to this fictional story, Andrei stood in court facing the results of every secret decision he had tried to hide.